There is a place on this planet where the water pressure is strong enough to crush solid steel like a paper cup. More people have stood on the moon than have reached the bottom of it. At the bottom of the ocean lies a darkness that has never seen the sun. Not once, not in 4 billion years. And in it sit places so deep and hostile that the people whose job is to explore them have quietly left some alone. One of them sits at number 3, a place you have heard about your whole life, where almost everything you were told is wrong. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will know the 10 deepest places in the ocean that even scientists are afraid to explore. Here is what you have to understand about deep. More than 90% of the ocean floor has never been seen by human eyes. We have better maps of Mars than of our own seabed. Light disappears by 200 meters, and the water below turns freezing and black in every direction. We begin where the Atlantic hides a secret most people swim right past. Number 10. The Puerto Rico Trench. Just north of some of the most popular beaches in the Caribbean, the seafloor suddenly falls away. Not by hundreds of meters, by thousands. Its deepest point, the Milwaukee Deep, drops to 8,376 meters below the surface. That is the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean, and a crude submarine reached it for the first time only in 2018, piloted by explorer Victor Vescovo. It is a jarring contrast. Tourists float in warm turquoise water, and a few kilometers away, the ocean floor opens into a trench deeper than most of the Pacific. The same sunlight that warms those swimmers never reaches even a fraction of the way down. This trench is also a fault line. It has produced some of the largest earthquakes in Atlantic history, and because it sits so close to land, a sudden movement down there could push a wave toward millions of people with very little warning. But on the other side of the planet, there is a trench that did exactly that and changed the world in a single morning. Number 9. The Java Trench. It is the deepest point in the Indian Ocean, more than 7 kilometers down, running along the edge of Indonesia. And it is one of the most dangerous geological features on Earth. This is a subduction zone, a place where one tectonic plate is being forced beneath another under unimaginable strain. When that strain finally releases, the entire seafloor can lurch upward in seconds. In 2004, a rupture along this system displaced a column of water so vast it produced one of the deadliest tsunamis in recorded history. And here is the unsettling part. Despite how closely it is watched, the trench itself remains almost completely unexplored. Its deepest reaches have been visited only a handful of times. We monitor it constantly, and we still barely know what is down there. The next place is so remote that for most of the year it is sealed off from the world entirely. Number 8. The Molloy Deep. Far in the Arctic Ocean between Greenland and the islands of Svalbard, the seabed drops to more than 5 kilometers, the deepest point in the entire Arctic. For much of the year, the surface above it is locked under drifting sea ice, which makes it one of the hardest places on the planet to physically reach. It was the final stop in Victor Vescovo's mission to touch the bottom of all 5 oceans, completed in 2019. What makes the Molloy Deep so eerie is the silence and the cold. The water here barely moves. Between the ice above and the depth below, sunlight never reaches it. It is one of the most isolated bodies of water on Earth, a sealed, freezing, lightless basin at the top of the world. Imagine sinking into it, the surface ice closing overhead, the last gray light thinning to a bruise and then to nothing. The temperature dropping until the cold itself seems to have weight. And then stillness. No current, no sound, no movement. Only black water that has lain undisturbed for longer than anyone can truly say. Down there, a sinking object would meet no resistance and no floor for kilometers. Just the slow, patient dark that has filled this basin since long before our species existed. And yet even here, life finds a way. Which brings us to a place where life does something that should be impossible. It thrives without the sun at all. Number 7. The Beebe vent field. Nearly 5 kilometers down in a trench off the Cayman Islands sits the deepest known hydrothermal system on Earth. Picture it. Tall mineral chimneys rising from the seafloor, pouring out black superheated fluid like factory smokestacks. Around the chimneys, the water is near freezing and utterly black, pressing in from every side in total silence. And the only light that has ever touched this place is the pale beam of a robot, catching the slow curl of mineral smoke as it vanishes into the dark. The water leaving these vents reaches around 400 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. It does not boil because the pressure at that depth is far too high to allow it. By every rule you were taught in school, nothing should live here. No sunlight, crushing pressure, water hot enough to destroy most living tissue laced with toxic metals and sulfur. And yet, when researchers sent a robot down and reported their findings in the journal Nature Communications in 2012, they found the vents swarming with life, pale, eyeless shrimp packed by the thousands across the chimney walls, thriving in a place that should kill them. The reason rewrites a basic assumption about biology. These creatures do not depend on the sun. They depend on chemicals. Bacteria here turn the vent's mineral fluid directly into energy in a process called chemosynthesis, an entire food web powered not by light, but by the planet's own internal heat. Whole colonies of living things crowded around a chimney of scalding poison in permanent night, kilometers from the nearest ray of sun, never needing daylight, never needing the surface world at all. Let that sink in. Life on Earth does not actually require the sun. Hold on to that idea, because a few places from now it stops being about Earth at all. Number 6. The Bloop. In 1997, underwater microphones operated by the American agency NOAA picked up something strange in the South Pacific. It was a sound, a single enormous pulse of ultra-low frequency, so powerful that it was detected by sensors more than 5,000 kilometers apart. It was louder than any known animal on Earth, including the blue whale. Naturally, imaginations ran wild. For years, the bloop became the internet's favorite evidence for some massive, undiscovered creature lurking in the deep. A living thing the size of a building calling out from the dark. But the truth, when NOAA finally tracked it down, was almost stranger. After listening closer and closer to Antarctica, scientists concluded the sound matched something else entirely. An ice quake. The groaning, cracking roar of a gigantic iceberg breaking apart and grinding against the seafloor. The ocean was not screaming. It was the ice, and it was loud enough to circle the planet. That sound came from the bottom of the world. So does the next place, but this one has been sealed and untouched for millions of years. If you are still here, you already understand something most people never think about. The deep ocean is not empty space. It is the largest, least explored environment on the planet. And the deeper we go, the less the normal rules apply. You are about to see the place at number 3, the one I told you about at the start, the place you have heard of your whole life. But first, the discovery that made scientists start looking at other planets differently, and it begins under 4 kilometers of solid ice. Number 5, Lake Vostok. In the center of Antarctica, buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, lies a lake the size of a small sea. Liquid water, not frozen. Sealed off from the sky, from sunlight, from the rest of the living world. And here is the part that is hard to absorb. It has been sealed like that for an estimated 15 to 25 million years. Think about that. The last time anything touched the surface of that water, there were no humans anywhere on Earth. A British and Russian study in the journal Nature confirmed the lake existed in 1996. Then, in February 2012, after more than 20 years of drilling, a Russian team's borehole finally broke through into the water itself. But there was a problem. The fluid used to keep that borehole open may have contaminated the very first samples. Which is why, years later, scientists still argue about what, if anything, truly lives in that sealed water. The question that gripped scientists was simple. Could anything still be alive down there? In total darkness, under crushing pressure, cut off for millions of years. And this is where the deep ocean connects to something far larger than Earth. Because Lake Vostok is almost a perfect mirror of two worlds in our own solar system. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, both hiding liquid oceans beneath shells of ice. If life can survive sealed under Vostok, feeding on chemicals instead of sunlight, the same may be true out there, in the dark water under the ice of another world. NASA's chief scientist at the time said a discovery like this could change the way we think about life itself. It would mean life is not a fragile accident that needs a warm, sunlit world to begin, but something stubborn enough to take hold anywhere there is water, heat, and time, even in the sealed black heart of a frozen continent. And if it can begin in a place like that, then every icy moon with a hidden ocean stops being a dead rock and becomes a sealed jar that might already hold something alive, and almost nobody noticed it happen. But for all that the ice can hide, the open ocean still holds the record for the most extreme life ever found. Number 4. The Hadal Zone. Below 6,000 meters lies a region named after Hades, the ancient underworld. It contains the deepest trenches on Earth, and the conditions there are almost beyond comprehension. The pressure can exceed 1,000 times what you feel at the surface, the equivalent of stacking dozens of jumbo jets on top of a single human body. For a long time, scientists believed fish simply could not survive past a certain depth. The pressure should rupture their bodies. Then in 2023, a team from the University of Western Australia released footage that stunned marine biologists. In a trench off the coast of Japan, their cameras filmed a small, ghostly snailfish swimming calmly at 8,336 meters down. That should not exist. It is the deepest a fish has ever been recorded, and researchers believe it sits very close to the absolute limit of where any fish can survive on this planet. A pale, palm-sized animal, alive at a depth that would crush a submarine. It did not look armored or monstrous. It looked delicate, almost translucent, drifting calmly through water heavy enough to fold steel, as if the pressure that should have destroyed it simply did not apply to it. But it is not even the strangest thing the ocean has been hiding, and the next place proves it. Number 3, the one I promised you, the Bermuda Triangle. You already know the legend. A stretch of the western Atlantic between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico where ships and planes are said to vanish without a trace. For decades, it has been blamed on aliens, sea monsters, time warps, and the lost city of Atlantis. The legend itself largely traces back to December 1945, when 5 U.S. Navy bombers, Flight 19, vanished during a training mission, along with the seaplanes sent to look for them. 14 men, gone, with no wreckage ever recovered. But here is what almost no one tells you. The real story of the Bermuda Triangle is not in the sky. It is on the seafloor, and it is stranger than the myth. This region sits right at the edge of the Puerto Rico Trench, the same abyss we started with, one of the deepest places in the entire Atlantic. The seabed here does not gently slope away. It plunges. Anything that sinks in the wrong place is gone, kilometers down into a darkness no salvage team will ever reach. That alone explains why so little wreckage is ever found. Then there is the science that turned the myth into something real. Parts of this seabed hold vast deposits of frozen methane. Under the right conditions, those deposits can release sudden, enormous bursts of gas. An eruption of methane lowers the density of the water above it, and a ship floating on that water can lose its buoyancy and sink almost instantly with no wave, no warning, and no time to call for help. Picture it from the deck. Clear sky, calm sea, and then the water simply opening beneath the hull like a trap door, churning into froth that cannot carry a ship's weight. And in seconds, there is nothing there at all. Only the surface closing over as if the vessel had never existed. Add unpredictable rogue waves, sudden storms, and the fact that this is one of the few places where a compass can point to true north instead of magnetic north, confusing navigators for centuries. And the supernatural mystery quietly dissolves into something far more unsettling. The Bermuda Triangle was never haunted. It is just deep, violent, and indifferent. And that changes how you think about our planet, because the most frightening places do not need a monster. The ocean itself is enough, which leaves only two, and both of them are deeper than everything you have just seen. Number 2. The Sirena Deep. Almost everyone has heard of the deepest point in the ocean. Almost no one has heard of the second. In the same vast scar in the western Pacific as the most famous trench on Earth lies the Sirena Deep, a separate abyss plunging to around 10,700 meters. That is nearly 11 kilometers straight down. It is deeper than Mount Everest is tall, with room to spare. And here is what unsettles scientists. We have visited it only a handful of times. While the world fixated on the single deepest spot, this second abyss, almost exactly as deep, almost as extreme, sat just kilometers away, barely explored. An abyss nearly 11 kilometers deep, a wound in the planet that could swallow Everest whole and still leave water above its peak, sitting in near total obscurity, unnamed in most minds, unseen by almost everyone alive. Two of the deepest wounds on the entire planet side by side in the same trench, and we gave one of them a famous name and left the other in the dark. And that raises an uncomfortable question about everything else down there. If a trench nearly 11 kilometers deep can sit in the shadow of its more famous neighbor, almost ignored, how much of the deep ocean have we truly seen? The honest answer is almost none of it. But none of these prepare you for what comes last. The deepest place on Earth, where only a handful of humans have ever gone. Number 1. The Challenger Deep. At the southern end of the Mariana Trench in the western Pacific, the ocean reaches its absolute limit, the deepest known point on the surface of the Earth. Victor Vescovo's expedition measured it at roughly 10,935 meters, just under 11 kilometers down. To understand what that means, turn it upside down. If you dropped Mount Everest into the Challenger Deep, its peak would still sit more than 2 kilometers underwater. The pressure at the bottom is almost beyond imagination, over 1,000 times the pressure at the surface. It is the weight of the entire ocean above you, pressing in from every direction at once. A pocket of trapped air is crushed to nothing. Most machines we build simply implode. Only a tiny number of people have ever made the journey down. The first, in 1960, sat inside a cramped steel sphere called the Trieste, watching the walls for cracks as they sank for nearly 5 hours into total black. The daylight above shrinking to a pinprick and then going out completely. For the rest of that descent, there was nothing to see at all. No landmark, no glow, no sense of motion, only the creak of the hull and the depth gauge ticking down into a place nothing living had ever come back from to describe. And here is what makes this disturbing. More people have walked on the surface of the moon than have reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep. We sent humans 250,000 miles into space before we sent them 11 kilometers down into our own planet. We knew the far side of the moon before we knew the floor of our own sea. And when we finally did reach the very bottom, past the pressure, past the darkness, past the limits of life itself, do you know what was waiting there? A plastic bag. in the deepest, most remote, most hostile point on the entire planet, a place almost no living human has ever seen with their own eyes. There was human garbage. We had not even arrived as explorers. Our trash had beaten us to the deepest point on Earth. You read that correctly. We reached the bottom of the world and we had already been there. That is the truth the deep ocean keeps trying to tell us. It is not empty. It is not lifeless. And it is not as far away as we like to believe. More than 90% of it is still unexplored. We have mapped the planets. We have photographed black holes. And the largest part of our own world, the cold, crushing, living dark beneath the waves, remains the greatest unknown left on Earth. The question is no longer whether something is down there. The question is what we will find when we finally look. Before you go, 2 quick things. If you want to keep exploring the planet's most hidden places, the next video goes somewhere very different. Top 10 forbidden islands you're not allowed to set foot on. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And drop a comment and tell me which country you are watching from, and which of these 10 places you would actually descend into if you were given the chance and your safety was guaranteed. I read every single one.